Hello, everyone. This is Pastor Eric Simpson again, Rosington Community Baptist Church. Thank you so much for everyone who is following along on this Lent series leading up to Easter 2022. If you remember, we've been looking at these various events along the Passion story of Christ leading up to the cross and, of course, the resurrection in light of all what's happening in Ukraine, and we will bring that out again today. Today we want to move from the upper room to the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus is going to go with the 11 now. If you remember, Judas has now gone out. He is getting ready to contact the Jews, those who are going to come and arrest him. So we're going to be looking at Luke chapter 22, starting in verse 39, just reading down for a few verses, and we want to make a few comments as we look into this particular part of the Passion story. Verse 39 says, "Coming out, he went to the Mount of Olives, as he was accustomed, and his disciples also followed him. And when he came to the place, he said to them, 'Pray that you may not enter into temptation.' And he was withdrawn from them about a stone's throw, and he knelt down and prayed, saying, 'Father, if it is your will, take this cup away from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done.' Then the angel appeared to him from heaven, strengthening him. And being in agony, he prayed even more earnestly. Then his sweat became like great drops of blood falling to the ground. And when he arose from prayer and had come to his disciples, he found them sleeping from sorrow. Then he said to them, 'Why do you sleep? Rise and pray, lest you enter into temptation.'" Jesus is undoubtedly facing the most difficult time in his ministry. He is getting now ready to face the results of Judas's betrayal, and of course, part of the pain and suffering that Jesus is now experiencing is that of the betrayal, as we spoke of last time. But not only that, it won't be long now before Peter himself, the one who said, "Jesus, no matter what happens, I'm going to stick with you. I am for you no matter what." Peter will deny that he even knows Jesus. Then Jesus is going to experience the beatings, the crown of thorns being put on his head, and of course ultimately the nails that are going to go into his hands and into his feet as he's there on the cross. You know, we speak about the cross almost like it's a phrase that, you know, we can get so used to these words. If you are a church attender, or even if as a believer, we get used to these words, used to saying these things. But we have to realize that, you know, Jesus was not the only one that experienced this back in the ancient Roman world. The crucifixion was the Roman ultimate execution device. And this was reserved for the worst of criminals. And it wasn't that a death happened quickly or painlessly, but this death was protracted. It was extended. It prevented the person who was being crucified from breathing. They had to push up on those wounds, on those nails, in order to get breath. So quite often that the person would die not from the nails, but essentially being starved of oxygen. So the death was slow and long and painful. So Jesus suffered from the betrayal of Judas. He suffered from being denied by Peter. He suffered from the beatings and the ultimate crucifixion. But then, in a way that I will never be able to understand, how that he took upon himself our sin. The sinless died for the sinner. The one who had no sin took upon himself the sins of the world. I can't imagine that kind of pain and suffering. Now, as Jesus goes into this section, he says, and as part of this prayer, which every time I read it, it just makes my mind wonder how this works. He said in verse 42, he said, Father, if it is your will, if it's possible, take this cup away from me. And this cup he's referring to would be the suffering, would be the crucifixion, would be this judgment. He said, nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. Jesus was saying this. He's saying, God, Father, I don't want to have to go through this suffering. But Father, if this is part of your ultimate plan, I'm willing to do it. Jesus surrenders to the will of the Father, knowing that God had a purpose and a plan for all that he allows. Now, I know for so many in Ukraine, the question comes up, and I know the question has come up many times. And just recently I saw a video clip of a father sitting in a hospital corridor. Must have been in Poland or Romania or somewhere. They had come out of the country. This father had his head in his hands, and his 15-year-old daughter was in that room, having had her leg amputated because of shrapnel from a Russian missile. And his little boy, 6 or 7 years old, if I remember right, was in the bed next to her. And this father prayed. And he said, God, why is this happening? And I'm so sorry I wasn't able to protect my babies from what's happened. And for all of my friends in Ukraine, I am truly sorry for all these things that are happening. To Liana, Tanya, Marina, Vitaly, Tasha, Elia, Dima, Vlad, Ed, Polycarp, Sergey, and many others that I can't remember names to or something. I'm truly sorry for all that's happening. And I know you may be wondering yourself, why is God allowing this to happen to our country? Why are so many people suffering? And I wish I had an answer for all those questions. I don't. But I would like to encourage you, if I could, just for one moment, for all those who had walked with me during that time when we looked in Job. If you remember, one of the lessons that we learned in Job was that there's so many things happening behind that spiritual curtain that we can't see. Then as Job was going through all that great pain and suffering and all those difficulties, he too asked that question, why? But Job never got the answer to why. At the end, he just got a much larger vision of who God is. And so Job came to an understanding and a trust that whatever God was allowing to happen, it was going to be part of his grand purpose and plan. And I wish I could tell you how this fits into God's plan. I don't know. I can tell you that the world is coming alongside Ukraine in a way that I think that defies history. The world is coming alongside in compassion and love and an outstretched arm that is bringing, that in my mind is showing the reality that we are created in the image of God, in that we can show compassion on people that we don't even know. So I think there are great things that are happening. I think there's amazing things that are happening in the midst of all this pain and suffering. And I wish we didn't have to go through it. I wish we didn't have to. All I can do is try to offer you just a word of encouragement that there are people all around the world that love you, that are praying for you, and that are walking with you as best we can through these dark days. And I pray that at the end of all this, that God's name would be lifted up, that many, many people would be brought to Jesus, and that Ukraine would be stronger and better and heart of the world as it should be.